Unit number 61 at the hidden RV and mobile home park north of Vancouver is a place that Casey Jewell calls home, but there's nothing charming about it.
Think people should be living in these kind of conditions?
No. Nobody should be living in this.
The place is falling apart, and no one will fix it. There's a hole in the kitchen ceiling.
Because when it rains, it drips. It's like got all these buckets.
She has no working stove, and the cabinets look like they're about ready to fall.
I had food all in here before this happened, and it all got destroyed because the water got into there, so I had to throw all my food out.
When we visited in late January,
Nothing.
Casey hadn't had running water in 2 weeks.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So
Management shut off water during a cold snap, she said, and never turned it back on.
So I mark it every time.
Casey's toilet stopped working months ago, and the drain in the tub spills straight to the ground. The only warmth comes from a small portable unit, because the heater, it's broken too.
It's gotten worse. It's gotten worse.
It's unlivable.
Casey's 22-year-old son, Charlie, has started sleeping at his girlfriend's place. He just can't bear the conditions anymore, or the smell.
Like a pungent mold smell. It's not as bad in like cold condition, but when it gets warm outside or hot, it gets unbearable in here. It's hard to breathe.
Charlie has tried to help by patching holes and draping a tarp over part of the roof, but he could only reach so far, fearing he'd fall through it. Charlie and his mom have complained to management repeatedly about the mobile home, which they rent. They don't own the unit. They've sent emails and taken photos to help document the problems.
Should they be fixing this property?
They don't want to. They should, but they don't want to.
And on top of that, the rent is going up. A notice taped to Casey's fridge warns that monthly rent will soon go from $925 to $950. As it is, Casey admits she's barely getting by, working part-time at Fred Meyer.
It's frustrating, but I have to tell myself I have nowhere else to go. I have no money to go anywhere else. I don't know what to do anymore.
Don't people have a right to safe, livable conditions?
Yeah, actually, in Washington, that right is express. It's statutory.
Carl Snodgrass of Northwest Justice Project explains Washington's Landlord-Tenant Act requires landlords to maintain their property or keep premises fit for human habitation. Things like electrical, plumbing, and heating have to work. But buried in that same law is an exception.
So if you're behind on rent in Washington State, you can't force your landlord to make necessary fixes.
Right. Yes. Yeah. If you're behind on rent, you basically have a right to habitable housing that you have no way of enforcing.
Which is where Casey fits in. She fell behind on rent a couple years ago during the pandemic. She's been on a payment plan, $50 a month on top of her normal rent, but she still owes, and frankly, may never catch up because management tacks on late fees.
Under the way that the law is written, being on a payment plan does not count as being current on your rent.
Which means there are no consequences for the landlord. They can ignore repair requests for tenants who are behind on rent.
It's frustrating because I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Because I owe money to this company because I was late on rent.
So, who is this landlord? Hidden RV and Mobile Home Park is owned by Michael and Denise Werner, according to corporate records. The Vancouver couple owns RV In-Style Resorts, title sponsor of the Clark County Amphitheater in Ridgefield. Records show they also have a convention center, investment company, and own and operate dozens of mobile home and RV parks across Oregon and Washington. In December, the Werners made headlines after a judge ordered the Vancouver couple and their companies to pay $926,000 in penalties for unlawfully issuing eviction and utility shutoff notices at an Owako mobile home park. According to the Washington Attorney General's office, the Werners refused to keep the Beacon Charters and RV Park clean, allowing a rat infestation, piles of garbage, and feces-smeared bathrooms. In court records, the AG's office wrote Michael Warner stated he does not believe the law applies to him, and Denise Warner described the Beacon residence as filth. KGW tried to reach the Warners for comment in person, by email, and through their attorneys. We gave them a week to respond. They never did. Public records show the Warners own a $1.8 million home on the Columbia River and have a pair of mansions in Arizona, including this hilltop property currently on the market for $7.4 million. It's a far cry from the squalor that Casey has been living in.
I'll go anywhere right now. If it's a tiny little home, just for us, you know, with the working bathroom, I'll be happy.
Because unit number 61 at the hidden RV and mobile home park is no place to call home.
Nobody in their right mind should be living in this at all. Nobody should be living in this. Our beautiful kitchen with no hole in it.
What once seemed like a dream is now home for Casey Jewell. The Vancouver woman moved into a freshly painted mobile home last week.
Much better. Much better.
We first met Casey in February at the hidden RV and mobile home park north of Vancouver. The unit she was renting was falling apart, and no one would fix it.
Think people should be living in these kind of conditions?
No. No. Nobody should be living in this.
At the time, she had no running water. The heater had broken, the toilet stopped working, and there was a hole in the kitchen ceiling.
Because when it rains, it drips. It's like got all these buckets.
Casey and her son had complained to management repeatedly. They'd sent emails and taken photos, but nothing seemed to change. Until...
And when you got contact with them, that's when they're like, oh, we better do something.
Our story, along with public outcry, prompted her landlord to find Casey a new place to call home, just around the corner. It's got a nice kitchen with cabinets and appliances, heating and air conditioning, new flooring, and unlike her old place, a working toilet.
Music to my ears.
Casey considers herself lucky. There are other low-income renters who don't have the same support. Donors have contributed more than $12,000 to help Casey cover back rent and expenses.
Thank you. Thank you for your prayers.
Casey's story also helped highlight a loophole in Washington law. She'd been paying her monthly rent, along with $50 extra, after falling behind during the pandemic. In Washington, if you're behind on rent, you can't force your landlord to make necessary fixes, explained Carl Snodgrass of Northwest Justice Project.
It's one of those things that I can't believe we created a system that does that.
A proposal before the Washington state legislature would have closed the loophole, but the House bill never got a hearing during the 2024 short session. Representative Strom Peterson said he'll try again next year.
I think that is the next logical step to make sure that, those kind of really bad actors, kind of slumlords, for lack of a better term, really need to be held accountable. And this is the way we can do it.
Many low-income renters live in poor conditions like Casey did because of the Washington law. They can't force their landlord to make necessary repairs. She understands the hardship and is especially grateful to have a new place to call home.
I got my happy ending.
Roughly 40 current and former tenants of a mobile home park in Owaco, that's along the southwest Washington coast, will be getting a check for $10,000. Many of them are disabled, seniors, low income, or veterans. The restitution stems from a lawsuit filed by Washington's Attorney General. The AG's office claimed the owners of the Beacon RV mobile home park in Owaco refused to keep the property clean and unlawfully issued eviction and utility shutoff notices. In court papers, the AG's office wrote the landlords didn't think the law applied to them and described their tenants as, quote, filth.
To have this couple come in and to treat them with such an utter lack of respect and contempt, honestly, is, few things shock me more in my line of work, but I did find this to be disturbing.
The owners, Michael and Denise Werner of Vancouver, own and operate dozens of mobile home and RV parks throughout Oregon and Washington. Among those properties, the hidden RV and mobile home park near Vancouver. Earlier this year, we told you about a woman living in squalor there. The owners refused to fix her trailer until our story aired. She's since moved into a new unit. We tried to reach the Werners today for comment. No one responded to our emails.
A Vancouver woman who lived in squalor with no heat or running water in her rented mobile home is suing her landlord. Casey Jewell claims the property owners unfairly charged her back rent, then tacked on extra fees before moving her into a new unit. Her attorney, Carl Snodgrass, is with the nonprofit Northwest Justice Project.
She's in a new place, but there hasn't been any accountability for what she went through for so long. The conditions that she was forced to live in.
We first met Casey back in February at a mobile home park north of Vancouver. The unit she was renting was falling apart and no one would fix it.
Think people should be living in these kind of conditions?
No. Nobody should be living in this.
At the time, she had no running water. The heater had broken, the toilet stopped working, and there was a hole in the kitchen ceiling.
Because when it rains, it drips. It's like got all these buckets.
Casey and her son had complained to management repeatedly, but nothing seemed to change.
And when you got contact with that, they're like, oh, we better do something.
Our story, along with public outcry, prompted her landlord to find Casey a new place to call home, just around the corner. But according to a newly filed lawsuit, it wasn't a smooth transition. Casey claims before she could move, the landlord demanded back rent and tacked on extra fees that weren't in her rental agreement. The lawsuit claims the owners, Hidden Village LLC and Home and Parks LLC, violated several state laws by renting her a unit that was unsafe and didn't have running water for 57 days.
I hope tenants realize that they have rights, that you don't have to live in unlivable conditions. You don't have to tolerate that.
The mobile home is owned by Denise and Michael Werner of Vancouver. We've reported on them before, including a recent judgment where they had to pay nearly $1 million in penalties for issuing unlawful eviction and utility shutoff notices at a different mobile home park in Washington. The Werners did not respond to our request for comment on Casey's situation or this new lawsuit.